In the UK and around the world, I'm Joanna Gosling. We're covering all the latest COVID-19 developments here in Britain and globally. Official statistics released in the UK show the number of excess deaths caused. More about those latest figures from the Office for National Statistics about the number of deaths. Joining me, Robert Cuff, the BBC Head of Statistics. Just talk us through, Robert, that 55,000 figure, because that's the number of excess deaths, but it's always a complicated picture, isn't it?
OK, now those were people who had tested positive for the coronavirus and then died within 4 weeks of that. And that's the bar we're seeing at the top of this chart right behind us. So those are people with a positive test result, but that misses you if you never got tested and there maybe wasn't enough testing in care.
We compare that like for like.
Because every country is
all COVID deaths have been in care homes.
And that's pretty staggering, and we think it might be even bigger, in fact, because if you look at those 40,000 deaths we were talking about a second ago, the ones that mention COVID on the death certificate, well, about 11,000 of those have been falling across the UK. In care homes, they'd been lagging. This is see from the chart, both total deaths are falling, COVID registered deaths are falling as well, so they're both coming down. There's maybe a little bit of an artefact in the last week. That week of the 8th of May was a bank holiday. Not very many death registrations get processed. But this fall is even bigger than you'd expect if you just closed all the registration offices for a week. So while
from the statistics as they come through on this week-by-week basis from the ONS.
What they do.
Well, let's get more on the unemployment figures now from the Office for National Statistics. The first set of unemployment and benefit figures affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. The number of people claiming unemployment benefit in April soared by more than 856,000 to almost 2.1 million. Let's go to our business presenter, Ben. I'll have more analysis from Ben a little bit later. President Trump says he's taking an anti-malaria drug as a precaution against COVID-19, even though American health authorities have warned against it. The US Food and Drug Administration said several weeks ago there was no proof that hydroxychloroquine was effective against the virus and that it could cause heart problems. Mr. Trump has also renewed his attack on the World Health Organization over its response to the initial outbreak in China. In a letter, he said he might make the temporary freeze of US funding of the WHO permanent if it doesn't reform. Peter Bowes reports. President Trump's renewed criticism of the WHO comes as the organisation holds a second day of an online meeting of its governing assembly. Our correspondent Imogen Fuchs is in Bern for us, and she said what the response has been. We'll have some analysis of that row in the next 20 minutes or so with our reality check correspondent Chris Morris. Beijing has responded, and we'll bring all of that in a little bit later. Now, the UK's Cross-Party Science and Technology Committee has said testing capacity was not increased early or boldly enough when the outbreak began. It said a lack of capacity had driven the decision in mid-March to scale back contact tracing and largely restrict tests to hospital patients. Our assistant political editor, Norman. Sweden has attracted worldwide attention for never going into a full lockdown during the pandemic, but now the country is facing growing criticism for failing to protect its older population. More than half the number of elderly deaths from the virus have taken place in care homes. The BBC has seen evidence which suggests some regions may be restricting access to healthcare by discouraging nurses and care workers from sending patients into hospital. Maddie Savage reports from Stockholm. Professor Chris Warhurst, Director of the Institute for Employment Research at Warwick University. Thank you for joining us. Are these figures in line with what you were expecting? Chris Warhurst, thank you very much. Many families across the UK have been struggling with the financial strains that have come with the pandemic, including Camilla Ferry and her husband Michael, who both lost their jobs in hospitality when the lockdown began. Neither of them qualified for the government's furlough scheme, leaving them without an income. They've been speaking to our Scotland correspondent, Lorna Gordon. The claims that the President has been making with our reality check correspondent, Chris Morris. Hi there.
Hello.
So let's start then, first of all, with his claim that the WHO failed to adequately get and share information. Chris. There has been a huge rise in the number of people claiming unemployment benefit because of the lockdown. Before the pandemic, employment had hit a record high. Ben Thompson is our business. Just over 4,000 people have died in Turkey during the pandemic. Istanbul has been the epicentre. Life is slowly getting back to normal with some of the lockdown restrictions eased, but one place remains busy, the cemetery. Naren Eldon reports. Time now for a look at the weather with Carol. This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. Hello and welcome to audiences in the UK and around the world. I'm Joanna Gosling. We're covering all the latest COVID-19 developments here in Britain and globally. Official statistics released in the UK have shown the number of excess deaths caused by COVID. Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Thank you for joining us. What is your reaction to those figures? Well, let's just take a moment to share with you some of our BBC research comparing the way the outbreak is currently affecting different countries around the world. Well, let's talk more about this with Sheetal Palmer from BBC Asian Network. Sheetal, just remind us what the evidence is in this country of how BME communities are being affected differently. Well, Care England, which represents care home providers in England, says he believes the number of cases of COVID-19 in care homes has reached the top of the curve. Speaking in front of Parliament's Health and Social Care Committee, Professor Martin Green also revealed there have been significant delays in getting COVID-19 test results and called for regular testing in care homes. Let's go to Jeremy Hunt. Formerly, 60% of care homes have had no reported cases of coronavirus. The 1 o'clock news is coming up in a few moments with Simon McCoy. Right now, it's time for a weather update with Stav Daenerys.